There was a lot of improvement, but there's still so much more need for growth.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. And where we get started today is our usual Monday, the day after the weekend ends. What did this team look like after a little more thought, a little more look in the numbers, re-watching different things? And for me, I got a firsthand look at the Bruins this year and looking at them in Louisiana, thinking, all right, what are we going to think about this game against LSU where the Bruins were at 1 point 24-point dogs, I think ended as 21.5-point dogs, and then covered, played well, and actually were tied, led for a decent portion, tied, and it was a one-score game going into the fourth quarter, in a game the UCLA absolutely could have fought back and tied, forced overtime, whatever it was. Yes, they lost by 17, but there's opportunities for UCLA to have things go their way. Okay, that's where the optimism stops because they ended up losing, and those weaknesses reared their ugly heads. Let's go offensively and start for the Bruins there. Okay, what do I think this team was good at? Well, we saw a lot of new characters getting more roles, right? Berger, he did show himself in the Indiana game, got a couple more touches in this game. Then you got Kwazi Gilmer. Welcome to the Kwazi Gilmer club because, with Titus Mokia-Otamalala out, Kwazi Gilmer had a couple of big plays, averaging 30 yards per catch as a freshman, making a spectacular catch down the sideline to set up first and goal for the Bruins and the game-tying touchdown at the time to end the first half right after his amazing catch. So we got to see some guys thrive in some roles. We saw what I thought to be an improved running game, which had been worse. Yes, they had negative 51 rushing yards from Garbers, and they had some weird, wacky plays that played a role into them sucking or sacks and everything in between with the huge minus 20 rushing play on the fumble on 2nd and 20, whatever it might be, a first down rush called back to a block in the back, or a chop block, I should say. So those rushing numbers, well, if you take away the negative 51, could only be 67, 70 yards, which wouldn't even be their season high. It just looked like they started to figure out a rhythm, and they really shot themselves in the foot way too often in this game, where they came to pass protection, running the ball, coughing the ball up a few times, right? You had the Garbers fumble near midfield. You had another fumble that the Bruins did recover, and then there was a late pick, but the pick was when the game was kind of out of reach, and Garbers was doing his best to keep a play alive in a throw he probably wouldn't make in a different part of the game, all right? But UCLA turned it over 2 times, and they never really once forced LSU into a scary situation where it looked like Nussmeier was going to throw it away into an interception, nor were they going to do something like that. So for the Bruins, you saw Garbers, 22 for 36, 280 yards, couple of touchdowns, average nearly 8 yards per pass, a QBR of 47. When you look at the QBR, the quarterback on the other sideline, he had 86. That's tough to do, but you mix in a couple of turnovers for Garbers, slightly worse completion percentage, a lot less yards passed, and a lot less touchdowns passed for. That's probably why the QBR is the way it is. Then the running game. I saw positive signs in the running game despite the fact UCLA had less yards than they did against Indiana versus LSU. They did a lot of wacky things. The big play at midfield in the third, fourth quarter there, where they had a big run, called back to it a penalty. Then you had the big play just cost them like 30 yards towards midfield, right? What's the big play? I forget the two teams where it was like 2nd and goal and the ball got kicked and it turned to 3rd and goal for like 80 yards. That's what it felt like for UCLA, driving to potentially tie the game. And then next thing you know, the game was over because they had to punt it, and we'll get to the punter in a moment, and then it cough up possession. But I like the pieces stepping up. I like seeing Kwazi Gilmer. I like seeing Jalen Berger. Keegan Jones made a sighting. He led the team in rushing yards and was second on the team in reception yards, right? In receiving yards. 3 catches for 50 yards. He didn't lead the team in receptions, but he made plays. And then Logan Loya made a nice touchdown grab right before the half. Nice to see last year's leading receiver come in and make some plays. The things I don't like. Garber's getting hit so often in the backfield, right? What did LSU have? They had 5 sacks. UCLA is one of the worst teams in the country at protecting their quarterback. They're in the bottom part of the country at keeping their quarterback protected. UCLA, another thing is 5 tackles or 5 sacks, 5 tackles for loss. So the amount of tackles for loss basically is protecting their quarterback. The tackle for loss when it came to them coughing the football up was because they lost like 50 yards on one play. Because in the end, you saw Garbers get not punched, but literally just knocked to the turf again and again and again. Other things. J. Michael Sturdivant has been somewhat of a non-factor. 2 receptions, 26 yards, 1 catch for 23 yards, made a nice catch up one of the sidelines, just ripping the ball. I remember seeing an LSU fan in front of me thinking, that's a pick. Oh, J. Michael Sturdivant made a catch. And UCLA has a couple of guys that can make some catches like that, right? Like a Logan Loya in traffic in the end zone. Rico Flores, J. Michael Sturdivant, Kwazi Gilmer making a freshman sensational catch. All right. So guys made plays. It just didn't translate. UCLA would just do a couple of dumb things in certain spots. I liked in the game early when they're down touchdown, they were forcing things, converting on a 4th down, scoring a touchdown, making some nice plays. I thought Bieniemy was able to mix it up in certain moments to lead to UCLA's success offensively. But in the end, we're getting sacked 5 times. And when you're not generating pressure on the other side, and when they score 17 first half points, first game all season, they scored 2 touchdowns in a game, then 0 in the second half with a couple of opportunities. The Bruins had the ball out of the locker room in the second half with all momentum. The stadium was emptying out because it was so hot. Then even after that, they were driving the ball to potentially tie, if not score some more points. And UCLA comes up with nothing. Nothing. It was a positive performance. It was a passing grade for me. This is one of those, it's a progression throughout the year. Small steps, it's a C-. C's get degrees, but we don't want a C- because if they're going to keep at this performance, they're going to still lose every Big Ten game. So they got to get better. And they did get better by playing an LSU team that is ranked 16th in the country. You know, in a night game, that crowd would have been a little more devastating. The weather wouldn't have been a factor for both sides. Yet in the end, UCLA held their own with what is considered at the moment a top 20, top 15 team in LSU. We'll see where they figure it out. But the Bruins, they did their best to showcase that they're not just going to roll over and get smacked like they did against Indiana 2 weeks in a row. We'll find out what Oregon has for them. We'll find out what Penn State has for them. But the offense with a C- performance, I like Garber slowly growing. I don't like the dumb play calls that shoot them in the foot. What I didn't like also, penalties. Penalties. UCLA, of course, is combined offense, defense. 9 penalties for 80 yards total. All right. The Bruins only averaged half a yard. Not a yard, half a yard per rushing attempt. Some of that was hurt by the big negative plays and by the sacks. So you kind of all that mixed in takes away the positives they had running the ball. But technically, statistically speaking, UCLA didn't even average a yard per rush. And yet I'm sitting here thinking they still looked better. Like the eye test, they had better designs and did more things. While they did more weird fluky things that hurt themselves, they did things to try and change up the run game with a coach that can't generally find success running the football wherever he's been in Eric Bieniemy. He has thrown the ball. The Bruins had some open routes. But again, you want to be able to eat some clock, right? Not have incompletions, but when you're an underdog, you need to chew some clock up, right? First downs don't stop the clock anymore. So when you run the ball, you pound the rock, get a good 35 call, move the chains. You can kill like 6-7 minutes of a quarter. Quite a bit. UCLA just wasn't able to do that offensively. C- performance, but a performance like this again down the line, it won't be a passing grade. But what they look like against Indiana, what they look like in the first half against Hawaii, the Bruins came out with an improved effort, but the line, glaring issues that must be improved if they want to move the line of scrimmage in the Big Ten against future SEC teams, whatever it might be. The Bruins have to get better. They passed barely because there were some positive signs. Now, that won't be a C- performance going forward. That's where the teacher's kind of curving it, and it'll be much worse for the Bruins going forward if they can't improve how to protect Garbers, all right? Let him make decisions based on what he sees in front of him and not because he's running for his life. It'd be nice to see. C- for the offense. Let's talk about this defense, all right? We're going to talk about them in a moment. Decent signs, but 290-plus yard drives. That really killed the game. Next, on Locked On UCLA. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. And hey, if you looked at the Bruins this week, they covered. Go Bruins. Maybe they'll do so against the big spread against Oregon. More on that in a moment. But check out FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, here we go. Second segment of the Locked On UCLA podcast. Of course, it'll be obvious. I'm spinning this with a positive note. UCLA lost this one 34-17 to LSU. They got outscored 17-0 in the second half. And if you're a defense, they're not going to keep teams shut out for an entire 60 minutes, for an entire fourth quarter, or 4 quarters, I should say. And it'll be few and far between where they can shut out a team for an entire half. So the offense does have to speak up for themselves. Yet the inability to get to the quarterback was shown repeatedly here, right? UCLA was sacked 5 times. The Bruins have 5 sacks in the season. And it's been 3 weeks, 2 games. And UCLA has not had a single sack against Indiana or LSU in either of those 2 games. And they were bullied on the line of scrimmage. The Bruins couldn't get pressure. And when it was 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, those teams had enough time in the pocket, and the quarterback would just burn one of the DBs who was left on an island with too much time to cover a wide receiver, especially in the college game. What is UCLA struggling from? One, they just can't get to the quarterback. When Garrett Nussmeier goes 32 for 44, 352 yards, 3 touchdowns, and yes, he looked like the more mobile quarterback, not speed-wise, but when the Bruins did break through the line, just took a step to the right, sat there, delivered a little bit of a dime to a guy right there for 5 yards. Or when it seemed like the pocket collapsed, he stepped up, throws a dime, and it's a touchdown caught for LSU to give them a lead 17-10 or 14-10. So Nussmeier was impressive, delivered a good ball. He's no Jaden Daniels. He's a very different type quarterback than these dual threat, super exciting players. But he delivered a really great ball, deep throws, when it came to under slight duress, boom. But the Bruins could not get to him. And that is the problem defensively. UCLA is one of the worst teams in the country when it comes to sacking quarterback. They are in the 90th percentile. And the only reason they're in they're not 90th, but they're 90th in the country, close to it, when it comes to sacking the quarterback. The only reason they're not worse is because a lot of these teams in the country have played 4 games. UCLA's played 3. So if you go on a sack per game basis, the Bruins aren't the worst, but they're still near the bottom of the country by a sack in all of FBS football. All of FBS. Now, what is unique when it comes to sacks allowed, Indiana, which coming into the UCLA game had not allowed much pressure. LSU, who has a big vaunted offensive line, which is stacked around Nussmeier to keep him upright. Those are 2 teams in the top 20 after they've played UCLA when it comes to protecting the quarterback. Now, is it because of the UCLA game that they're in the top 20? They have a complete game with no sacks? Or those numbers now through 4 games that have held up for the Hoosiers and for the Tigers, where the Bruins were probably, at least at this stage, still looking for 3 defensive linemen, all transfers to all get in there. You mix in an injury or 2. You had no Keanu Williams on the line. You had a banged up, beaten up Jay Tuia, who was apparently a little hobbled throughout practice, was not fully available through all the practice week leading up to the LSU game. Still wanting some reinforcements on that line with less talent than the year before. All right, a team that can protect their quarterback really well and is physical up front, the Bruins are going to struggle. So I'm going to lean UCLA will get a sack at some point. Oregon is not as good this year, unlike last year, the year before with Bo Nix, this year at keeping their quarterback safe from pressure. Now, if Dylan Gabriel goes just, dinks and dunks, goes boom, 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 back and forth with short passing patterns, then UCLA has to live with it. Kind of what LSU did this week, which is why UCLA's performance defensively, when he gave up 454 yards, 8 yards per pass, 3.5 yards per rush. The problem with this was UCLA and Deshaun Foster, they made some sound decisions. They executed on special teams, which will get an A+ because they kicked a field goal. Nothing happened on the kick return game. And punting, Brody Richter pinned the Tigers inside the 23 times, inside the 10 twice. And the Tigers went on 2 95+ yard marches, taking over 6-7 minutes, it seemed like, in the second half, both resulting in touchdowns where they didn't bat an eye. Now, there's one situation where it's 3rd and 10 near midfield. UCLA does the fake signal. LSU false starts, but that's a penalty on the defense, makes it 3rd and 5. They pick it up, touchdown. Then later in the game, another 3rd and long. They complete it. They get burned on the coverage because they left a guy wide open. They left the tight end, Derek Mason, wide open. They blew that coverage. And 2 90+ yard drives after your special teams and your punter, Brody Richter, just killed the ball, right? Even LSU fans were marveling at the fact that he just dropped it on a pin inside the 5-yard line a couple of times, and UCLA couldn't stop them. So for that, the UCLA defense gets a D. Not an F, because they played and had much worse opportunity against Indiana. They get more points. LSU, yes, they could have run up the score, but you're not really going to run up the score in that opportunity. They didn't exactly run the ball down the Bruins' throats. They did run it when they wanted to in certain aspects. And the big thing is the DBs, they can make plays on the ball because there's not enough pressure on Nussmeier. And when he delivered a good ball, it was generally on the hands. I did like that when Brian Kelly decided to go for it near midfield, 4th and 7, the Bruins defense held up and said, that was a stupid decision on you, Brian Kelly. We're going to stop you. And that's where I thought, okay, LSU might choke this game away to make this a lot more competitive, which they did, allowing UCLA to score 3 points off of the Tigers not punting it. LSU punted it once, should have punted it twice because they went for it 4th and 7 near midfield, which is a dumb decision for Brian. I don't know what he's doing. That was just I'm going to flex on you. And the Bruins said, you're not doing that right now with a spirited effort. So unofficially 2 punts, officially 1 punt, 0 punts in the second half because LSU went down and tried and true. UCLA, one of the big bugaboos, though, is the inability to get off the field on 3rd down. 10 to 15 from LSU. I think Ben Bolch tweeted it. If you go on the NCAA website, you can see UCLA is like the worst at stopping 3rd downs. Why is that the case? Because when quarterbacks drop back and it's 3rd and 8 and they don't have to worry about 3rd and long and pressure, or if you have to bring a blitz and they just drop it off, or they get a quick hitter and they get a 1st down, that is the big thing. It all comes back down to the inability for UCLA to generate a pass rush. And I know everybody wants to point to a Kaika Malloy. And yes, I'm giving this defense a poor grade, but there still are hopefully reinforcements and better players, and maybe not better players, but just more players that can add to the rotation. There was a limited rotation against LSU this last week on a super hot, muggy, humid day, which everybody in the stadium was melting. Fans, coaches, players, everything. Everybody was melting. If they can't generate a pass rush, 3rd and long, which the Bruins can get to 3rd down, right? Most teams can force the opposition to get to a 3rd down. It's how often can you get off the field, and you saw the Indiana game. First drive of the game, they go down 3rd and long at least 3 times, it seemed like. They convert every single time. Against LSU, they had a couple of 3rd downs and 2 of those 90-yard drives. All right, you're going to allow 1st downs a couple of times from their own 10. But it's when it was 3rd and 10 from midfield, they do something stupid. You make it 3rd and 5. And then next thing you know, they convert, and they're just boom, boom, boom down the field. They score a touchdown. You have to get off the field on 3rd down or force the coach, like Brian Kelly, to make another weird decision and go for it 4th and 5 from the 40 when they don't trust their kicker in college to go for it from 56 yards, right? Put yourself in more positions to be successful. So UCLA's inability to get off the field on 3rd down was glaring in this game. I think there are positive signs defensively, but if they can't get pressure, although, as I mentioned before, these two teams they played, UCLA has, Indiana, LSU, two of the more physical teams up front with the eye test, have kept their quarterbacks upright, although they've also had quarterbacks that were not hobbled like Braden Shager was week one. They were able to stay upright, move out of the pocket, and deliver strikes on 3rd and long where the DBs were just scrambling to make sure it wasn't a long pass play for a touchdown. So a D for the defense, 8+ for special teams, and then offense C- because of improvement. It's not like it'll be a D, but C-. That's the lowest passing grade, right? Even technically you can get a D and pass a class. An F is for failing, but C-, pass it. But, there's better parts for the defense, better parts for the offense. We saw improvement, but the line is where they are lacking. And if UCLA can't figure out in a hurry, whether it's game planning wise, doing something different, I know they're trying their best, it will still be a very long season, despite the positives they've shown from week 3 into week 4. And Oregon, Dan Lanning loves to go and, just make laughers out of games that in teams that should not be competitive. Although this year's Oregon team has not exactly done that consistently, UCLA has to find a way to go run the football. All right. Run the football, protect Garbers, get a pass rush. And some of those things can translate into a surprising win one of these weeks. Do we have to wait till the Minnesota game in mid-October? Maybe. Maybe the Bruins can go surprise either the late night game against Oregon or the morning game against Penn State. All that and more. Let's go around the Big Ten next on Locked On UCLA. Well, the Bruins are back in the Rose Bowl. It might be at 8 p.m. Pacific against the Oregon Ducks, another top 10 team, but go support UCLA. Go to Game Time, get your tickets. You can use Game Time Picks. It helps getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. You can eliminate the fluff, go get the best deals on those UCLA tickets, maybe see a comedy event, a musical event, everything, or go check out the Bruins. Use Game Time. All you got to do is see where you're going to sit from the Rose Bowl. It will be a night game, so it won't be hot. Don't have to worry about if you're in the shade or not. And Game Time ticket coverage is a purchase-covered ticket with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take this, we're going to buy tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, here we go. Let's wrap up this episode today. Locked On UCLA, going around the Big Ten. What else happened in this conference? Well, I think we have to start with our probable favorite as a UCLA fan. I was on the Locked On Big Ten squad talking with everybody else, and I'm not sure anybody else would have had differing opinions than I did. But USC and Michigan, a game that was going on simultaneously and ended, I think, either just right after the UCLA LSU game, whatever. Michigan pulled off the surprising win. That was amazing to see. I didn't think that could happen. Nobody thought that could happen. And a Michigan team that literally could not, did not, would not throw the ball, did to, would to, should to, and beat USC too. Man, how they beat USC. One, it came down to they ran the ball, got a couple of big plays. Then with the SC fought back after a couple of mistakes, each team made 2 turnovers. So Michigan almost coughed up the lead, which they did. And then when the game was on the line, they had to go 90 yards. They literally ran it down USC's throats and won the game. 4th and goal from the 2. You can see how many times in the NFL where there's tush push, 4th and short, the teams got stopped. USC knew that Michigan was going to run the football. There's no need for sign stealing when you can just run the ball and get 150 yards, 200 yards rushing and score 27 points. Aided by a pick 6, a big play, a field goal, some short field positioning. That was how Michigan won the game, with some defense and old school run the football. Unfortunately, this year, UCLA hasn't proven they can run the football, so they can't just go manhandle USC later this year. They'll have to do it in a different way in the Rose Bowl. They'll have to do it a different way. But for now, It was fun to see a game where none of us, I didn't expect it. I'm not sure anybody else expected it. Even when Michigan changed quarterbacks early in the week and announced it to the whole public. We're going to come out and run the football. It's basically what they said, and they won the game. So as a UCLA fan, that was fantastic. Fan-freaking-tastic to see that happen. Regardless of our poor feelings against Michigan, it can be forgiven at least for a week when you go beat USC 27-24. Now the rest of the week. I was thinking, all right, Nebraska, I'm going to believe in this Husker squad. They're playing against an unbeaten Illinois squad. They're coming off a big Kansas win a week or two prior. And Illinois goes on the road in Lincoln and wins that game in overtime. Nebraska blew a late lead. Dylan Raiola was still looking good, close to 300 yards, 3 tubs. But then Illinois wins that one, 31-24 in overtime. Let me tell you, the 3 main college football games that Friday night between Illinois, Nebraska, Syracuse, and Stanford, and then Washington State, San Jose State, all extremely entertaining games. But for Big Ten purposes, we got to stick to this one. I was surprised that Nebraska lost this game at home, but the one-score curse has absolutely killed them. They've got like 2 wins in so many games. That's why I was wondering maybe they would do something weird when UCLA plays them once they have their feet under them. Who knows? Nebraska, I think, blew an opportunity to get a big early start in Big Ten play. And Illinois is atop the Big Ten standings unbeaten. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? This might be a weird year in college football with 12 teams making it. I'm not sure who exactly is going to make it. We all think it's going to be Ohio State. And even then, after the first quarter, they were tied with Marshall in their game. And eventually they blew out the Thundering Herd 49-14 with Will Howard completing some passes, close to 80% of a completion percentage, dominated. Penn State looked much better against a terrible Kent State team, 56-0. The Bruins, they get the 9 a.m. Pacific time game against the Penn State Nittany Lions in Beaver Stadium. So if you're trying to go to that game, you're not going to get a lot of time to tailgate out in Penn State. That'll be the 8 p.m. game, 9 a.m. game. Thank you, Big Ten. We're going to sleep late, get up early on back-to-back Saturdays. All right, what else happened? The funny thing I thought when I was looking at this Indiana score against Charlotte, Indiana coming off that big win, they're playing a Charlotte team that they're probably favored by a lot of points. Kurt Cignetti's come out, looked like a freaking, whatever you want to say, and everything positive about them. I saw the score a couple of times for that Indiana game against Charlotte, and I saw it when it was close. I didn't see it when it was 10-0 Indiana. I didn't see it when it was 52-14. As a UCLA fan, I was sitting there, oh, it's like 10-7. Oh, it's 17-14. They're barely beating Charlotte. Now, did I see Indiana score the late 2 touchdowns, or the 2 touchdowns in the third, or the next touchdown in the fourth where they scored 52 in 2 straight weeks and dominated another team at home in Memorial Stadium? I did not see that in Bloomington. But of course, the little stretch, I'm like, man, in different games, there's times when teams are very close and they blow them out and pull away with adjustments or just 2 touchdowns before the half. It was just funny. I was like, are you serious? They're not beating Charlotte. And then to see that they destroyed him, awesome. Maryland beat the brakes off Villanova. 38-20 doesn't tell the hell score because the Terrapins were up 24-0 at the break. Dominant, pulled away, solid. Maryland, they're 3-1. Rutgers, strong road win at Virginia Tech. They're up 14-0, 16-7 at the break, 23-7 through 4. Virginia Tech got really close, scoring 16 fourth-quarter points, but Rutgers eked out a win. They're unbeaten. That game for UCLA in New Jersey will be extremely tough in my mind. Then, here are all the games played by teams in the Big Ten that UCLA can beat. It's just how it happens that I'm reading this. But these are all teams I think UCLA can beat in various reasons at various stages if they improve, especially this year. Northwestern. As much as we're all saying UCLA might be the worst team in the Big Ten, I think Northwestern has a case for that. They scored 5 points against Washington. And Washington just lost to Washington State. The Huskies 3-1, but 1-0 in Big Ten play. They won 24-5. All right, that's a weird baseball score. That's a long basketball run. Heck, that's a crazy, terrible water polo score. But a football score, that just don't make no sense. Huskies dominate. I think UCLA, I'm not sure they're the worst team in the Big Ten, but they got to prove it by winning games in the Big Ten, or else they'll just be the laughing stock. But the Huskies, they get their first win. The Bruins go to Seattle. They don't get Northwestern this year. We'll see how much Washington improves, if Washington State is that good by beating them in Seattle, we'll find out. Iowa, Minnesota, the games for UCLA, which are their next couple of home games after they play Oregon. Iowa scoring 31 points. I'm not sure when Iowa scored and learned how to score 30 points, but they've done it, I think, 3 times this year. They're 3-1, 1-0 in Big Ten play. And yet their quarterback didn't have more passing yards than Minnesota's quarterback did, and he only threw for 209 yards, nearly 40 passing attempts. Well, Iowa ran the ball for 200 yards. They did the Michigan. We can run it down Minnesota's throats. Boom. Caleb Johnson, 3 touchdowns, 200 yards rushing. That's what Iowa did. Despite trailing at the half, they ran it, and beat the Golden Gophers. Iowa will have a strong contingent of Hawkeye fans at the Rose Bowl in early November, a Friday night game at 6. Probably won't have a lot of UCLA fans. I wonder what that game will be like. But Iowa's not the strongest offensively. And if they're not going to be able to pass the ball, UCLA might have a chance. And I think the same for Minnesota, who's now 2-2 and 0-1 in Big Ten play. Arguably, might be the next time UCLA's favored in a game. If they're not favored against Minnesota at home October 12th in the Rose Bowl, they will not be favored until, I think, maybe Fresno State at the end of the year. Then you've got Michigan State, Boston College. Sparty, they're starting unbeaten. Sorry, Locked On Spartans, but it was Boston College eking out a late win, 23-19. I think UCLA would have a fun time facing off against Jonathan Smart and then Aiden Childs. We'll find out. They don't get Sparty this year. They do get him in basketball. Can't wait for Tom Izzo and company to come to town. 23-19. Oregon State against Purdue. My thought is Purdue is the worst team in the Big Ten. Of course, we don't get to play that. Oregon State only threw for 100 yards in this game, and they still won this game going away by 17 points. 17 against Purdue at Oregon State, right? So it's nice to see some former Pac-12 rivals getting a new conference member, getting everything, whatever it is. All those games at the end, Washington, Northwestern, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan State, Purdue, those are all teams I think UCLA could compete with and beat that 15th place preseason ranking. Now, here I am talking a lot of crap for a UCLA team that's 1-2, hasn't proven they can run the ball, protect their quarterback, rush the passer, or stop teams on third down. But there are teams UCLA can beat, and some of those teams are on their schedule, 2 of which are at home this year. 2. So let's not write it off yet. As much as we had high hopes for them to maybe have an outside chance to go bowling, jump up the over-under win total, make Spencer McLaughlin look wrong and dumb with all his takes. Not looking like the case right now. The Bruins showed improvement and showed up against LSU, which could have been that signature win. Now the Bruins got to regroup and face off against the Oregon Ducks. We'll talk more UCLA Oregon, more UCLA basketball because practice is starting this week. So stay tuned for more content. Get excited for UCLA. Download, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for your support. Get your hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.